They had it all: the money, the fame, and the fastest car on the streets of Southern California. It was a beast of carbon fiber and hubris, a roaring monument to their own success. But when that million-dollar engine sputtered and died on a forgotten stretch of sun-baked asphalt, their arrogance was met with a silence it couldn't conquer. And in that silence, they laughed at the one man who could actually fix it. They saw a tattered coat and a weathered face. They saw hands stained with the grime of the streets and offered him scraps for his trouble, their mockery echoing in the twilight. They had no clue they were in the presence of a forgotten master, a ghost from the golden age of racing, a man who built legends with his bare hands. This is the story of how their laughter turned to awe, and how a simple request for food revealed a history they weren't worthy of knowing. The car, a bespoke hypercar that looked more like a fighter jet than a road vehicle, was dead. Its iridescent paint, a shimmering canvas of purple and blue, seemed to mock the lifeless machine beneath. Inside, you could cut the frustration with a knife. Kai, the group's self-appointed leader, slammed a fist against the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He was a man sculpted by privilege, his designer clothes a stark contrast to the dusty, desolate road they were stranded on. Outside, his girlfriend Chloe leaned against the car, her attention glued to her phone as she broadcasted their little drama to her followers. His friends, Leo and Marco, stood by helplessly, throwing out useless suggestions that only made Kai angrier. They had everything, yet in that moment they had nothing. No cell service, no solution, no way out. And from the shadows of a concrete overpass, an old man watched, his presence as quiet and unnoticed as the dust dancing in the last rays of the setting sun. Arrogance is a fragile shield. It shatters the second you lose control. For Kai and his crew, control was everything. Their lives were curated for an audience. Every street race a performance, every win a confirmation of their own superiority. Their car, a one-of-a-kind custom, built with a monster quad-turbo V12, wasn't just a car, it was their whole identity. And now it was a multi-million-dollar paperweight. "Did you try rebooting the infotainment system again?" Marco asked, his voice so tentative you'd think the question itself might scratch the flawless paint. Kai shot him a look that could kill. "Reboot the infotainment? It's the engine, you moron, not the radio." "What? You think I'm trying to find a better playlist?" Leo, ever the suck-up, popped the dramatic scissor door and strode to the back, lifting the engine cover with a hydraulic hiss. The heart of the beast was revealed, a labyrinth of polished chrome, braided steel lines, and carbon fiber. It was less an engine and more a piece of industrial art. Leo, having watched a few hundred hours of car shows, leaned in, hoping to project an expertise he was nowhere close to having. "Could be the fuel pump controller," he mused, pointing vaguely at a mess of wires. "These aftermarket systems can be finicky. Sometimes the voltage drops and they just shut down." Kai wasn't even listening. He was on his knees, plugging a fancy diagnostic scanner into the car's port. The device whirred. To life, its screen a flood of error codes that looked like ancient hieroglyphics to him. P0340, camshaft position sensor circuit malfunction. U0100, lost communication with ECM-PCM. P0087, fuel rail system pressure too low. It was a digital scream of failure, a language he couldn't understand. "It's just garbage," he roared, throwing the expensive scanner onto the passenger seat. "This is what I get for 10 grand in upgrades. The guy who tuned this thing is getting an earful." Chloe sighed dramatically, turning her phone's camera back on herself. "Okay, so update. Guys, we're literally stranded. Kai's masterpiece is officially dead, and my phone is at like 15%. This is the worst date ever." She punctuated the sentence with a pout, a calculated performance for her followers. And it was into this theater of rage and manufactured drama that the old man finally made his move. He rose from the concrete curb with a slowness that spoke of weary bones, his worn-out boots scuffing the asphalt. He wasn't a big man, but his presence seemed to absorb the noise around him. He walked toward the car, his eyes not on the flashy paint or the frustrated young men, but on the open engine bay. He stopped a respectful distance away, his gaze analytical. "Got a problem there," he said. His voice was raspy, like turning gravel, but it carried a quiet authority that cut right through their chatter. Kai barely glanced at him, his face a mask of contempt. "Yeah, we got a problem. One you know nothing about. Keep walking, old man." The man didn't move. His deep-set, surprisingly clear eyes scanned the V12's intricate layout. He seemed to be listening, not with his ears, but with some other, deeper sense. He could hear the car's silence, and he understood what it was saying, the faint ticking of cooling metal, the subtle scent of unburnt fuel in the air. These were things no diagnostic scanner could ever report. "It's not your computers," the old man said, his voice soft but firm. "Your technology is blind to this." Leo scoffed, stepping forward as if to guard the engine from the man's gaze. "Oh yeah? And what do you know? This is a quad-turbo V12 with a standalone ECU. It's more computer than engine. It's not some rusty old tractor you can fix with a piece of wire." The old man's gaze flickered to Leo, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was closer to pity. He'd seen boys like this 1,000 times. Boys who confused knowing the names of things with understanding how they worked. He turned his attention back to the engine, the silent, beautiful, broken machine. Section 2. The confrontation, the mockery, and the offer. Prejudice is a lens that warps reality. Through it, Kai and his friends saw not a man, but a stereotype. They saw poverty and assumed ignorance. They saw age and assumed he was irrelevant. They couldn't see the lifetime of knowledge hidden behind that weathered face, or the genius that lived in those calloused hands. So when the man spoke again, his words landed not as help, but as the punchline to a joke they were already telling themselves. "I can fix it," the old man stated. Not a question, but a fact. He paused. "For a meal." The words hung in the air. Then the laughter started. It wasn't a good-natured chuckle. It was sharp and cruel. Leo was the first to break, a loud, braying laugh that echoed off the canyon walls. Marco, ever the follower, joined in with a smirk, shaking his head. Chloe, of course, turned her phone on the old man, a nasty grin spreading across her face. "Oh my God, you guys, you have to see this," she narrated for her live stream. "This homeless guy just offered to fix Kai's $5 million hypercar for a sandwich. Like, can you even? The audacity." She zoomed in on his tattered coat. Kai was the most insulted. The offer was a violation of the natural order of things, where men like him drove cars like this and men like that were supposed to be invisible. He strode right up to the old man, puffing out his chest to intimidate him. "Listen to me carefully," Kai snarled, his voice low and menacing. "You think this is a joke? You think you can walk up here and mock me? This machine has more technology, in one fuel injector, than you've seen in your entire life. It was built by Swedish artisans and tuned by the best in California. And you think you can fix it with what? A prayer and a rusty wrench?" The old man stood his ground, his calm a stark contrast to Kai's vibrating rage. He wasn't intimidated. He had faced down far more dangerous men than this preening boy. "It's not about technology," the old man repeated, his voice patient, like a teacher with a slow student. "All that tech does is listen for what it's been told to. But it can't feel. It can't feel the rhythm. Your engine, it has no rhythm." It's fighting itself. Rhythm? Leo mocked, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. What's next? You gonna read its aura? Maybe it needs some healing crystals? But desperation is a powerful thing. Beneath all, his bluster, Kai was out of options. The sun was gone and the air was getting cold. His anger was burning out, leaving only the hard reality of their situation. He looked at the dead car, at his useless friends, and then back at the strange old man. A nasty idea started to form. It would make a great story. The time they let a homeless guy fix his hypercar. The content would be gold. Fine, Kai said with a condescending wave. You want to play mechanic? Let's play. You've got 10 minutes. Impress us. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a single, crumpled $5 bill, and threw it on the ground. There, Kai sneered. There's your payment. Go buy a burger. Now entertain us. But I swear if you put a single scratch on my paint, you'll be paying for it for the rest of your miserable life. Now go on. Dance, monkey, dance. The old man looked at the crumpled bill, then back at Kai. There was no anger, no humiliation, just a profound stillness. He didn't bend to pick it up. He just held Kai's gaze, then turned and walked to a rickety cart by the overpass, a cart they hadn't even noticed before. From beneath a blanket, he produced a long object wrapped in dark, oiled leather. He unrolled it on the ground with a quiet reverence. Inside was a set of tools, not the shiny chrome tools from Kai's garage. These were old, from another era. Forged steel wrenches worn smooth by decades of use, screwdrivers with wooden handles darkened by oil and sweat. They were antiques, but they were immaculate, each resting in its place. This wasn't the toolkit of a vagrant. This was the instrument collection of a virtuoso. Mastery has its own language. It isn't spoken with bravado or shouted in anger. It's communicated through the quiet confidence of movement, the economy of action. As the old man, Silas, knelt beside the dead heart of the hypercar, a silence fell over the arrogant young men. The jeering stopped. The smirks faded. They were about to witness a form of genius their modern world had taught them to forget. Silas ignored Kai's gleaming, untouched toolkit. His own well-worn tool roll was all he needed. He didn't start by yanking on parts. He started by listening. Turn the key, he said calmly. Just till you hear the first click, then stop. Kai, now more intrigued than angry, did as he was told. The car's electronics whirred, and a single sharp asterisk click asterisk echoed from the engine. Again, Silas commanded. Click. Again. Asterisk click dot asterisk. He had closed his eyes, his head tilted. He wasn't just hearing the click. He was analyzing its pitch, its duration. He placed a bare hand on the cold carbon fiber intake, then moved it to a turbocharger housing. He was feeling for vibrations, for the ghost of a resonance that didn't belong. Chloe had stopped filming her own face and now had her camera trained on Silas's hands, her uncaptioned video streaming out to a confused but captivated audience. He's not even doing anything, Marco whispered. But his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Silas picked up a long, slender screwdriver from his roll, one with a dark walnut handle polished smooth by years of use. He placed the handle against the bone behind his ear and the metal tip against a fuel rail. He'd turned a simple tool into a stethoscope, amplifying the machine's internal sounds. He moved it methodically, from the fuel pressure regulator to the injectors, his eyes still closed. He was mapping the engine's anatomy by sound alone. The young men watched, their world shrinking to the circle of light cast by the car's LEDs. They'd always understood cars as stats and brand names, horsepower, 0 to 60. They had never considered a car as something with a rhythm and a voice. After several minutes, Silas stopped. His eyes opened. He'd found it. There, he said, pointing to a spot deep within the engine's tangled guts. The problem is there. Leo leaned in, squinting. There's nothing there but the firewall. Not on it, Silas corrected patiently. Behind it. It's a custom job. When they put this engine in, they had to make new fuel lines. They ran one too close to the transmission housing, and the bracket they used, wrong density. It's amplifying a harmonic from the turbo wastegate. Kai and Leo exchanged a look of pure bewilderment. They didn't understand half the words, but they understood the conviction in his voice. Every time the turbo spools down, Silas continued like a professor giving a lecture, it sends a micro-vibration down that line. For 1,000 miles, nothing. But metal has a memory. The vibration found a sympathetic frequency and worked its way to the weakest point, the compression fitting on the main fuel block. The computer reads a sudden pressure drop and shuts everything down to protect itself. It's not broken, it's just shaken loose. Kai was speechless. Their master tuner, the man they'd paid a fortune to, had said nothing about this. Okay, great, Kai finally managed. But we can't even see it. It would take 6 hours just to get in there. Silas didn't reply. He was already working. He selected a small, oddly angled wrench from his kit. Then he took a length of baling wire from his cart and, with ancient pliers, bent it into a series of complex hooks and angles, a custom tool for a purpose only he could see. He knelt, his arm disappearing into the engine bay, up to his shoulder. He was working completely blind, guided only by touch and a mental map of the engine more accurate than any blueprint. They heard the faint scrape of metal on metal. A minute passed. Then 2. The only sounds were Silas's steady breathing and the distant chirp of crickets. They saw his knuckles tense. There was a soft asterisk squeak, asterisk of a thread tightening. Then he maneuvered a small piece of rubber he'd retrieved from his pocket into the same unseen space, wedging it into place with a soft asterisk thump asterisk. He pulled his arm out, covered in grease, but without a single scratch on any polished component. He took a clean rag from his tool roll and meticulously wiped his hands. He looked at Kai. Try it now. Kai hesitated, a knot of disbelief and dawning respect in his stomach. He slid into the driver's seat and took a deep breath. He turned the key. And the result wasn't just an explosion of noise. It was a perfect ignition. The V12 didn't just roar to life. It asterisk awoke asterisk. That rough, stuttering idle that always plagued it? Gone. Replaced by a deep, resonant, impossibly smooth hum. It was the sound of a perfectly balanced machine, a sound Kai had never heard before. He tapped the accelerator and the engine responded with a crisp, ferocious bark, cleaner and sharper than ever. It sounded powerful. It sounded happy. Kai, Leo, and Marco just stared, mouths open. Chloe's phone was still recording, but her hand was shaking. They had stumbled upon magic. There are moments that completely alter your reality. For Kai and his friends, this was one of them. The sound of that perfect engine was the sound of their own ignorance shattering. The man responsible was calmly rolling up his antique tools, his part in the drama seemingly over. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Kai stumbled out of the car. How? How did you do that? Who asterisk or asterisk you? Silas paused. Just a man who understands engines. But Leo, the amateur car historian, was staring at Silas with a dawning, horrified recognition. It wasn't just the repair. It was a detail he'd noticed, but hadn't processed. When Silas wiped his hands, Leo had seen the back of his right hand. On his knuckles were faded, scarred tattoos. WRAITH. The Wraith, Leo whispered. My grandfather. He was a crew chief back in the day, Leo said, his voice trembling. He couldn't take his eyes off Silas. He told me stories about the early days of stock car racing, about a mechanic who was more myth than man, a guy who could find 1/10 of a second in an engine just by listening to it. They called him the Wraith. Silas stopped packing. He stood slowly, his back to them. Leo, quote, S voice got stronger, more urgent, like puzzle pieces of a forgotten history were snapping into place in his head. He worked for one driver, one of the greats, a black driver in the Jim Crow South, a guy named Wendell Scott who was trying to break into the Grand National Series. My grandpa said Scott was a hell of a driver, but his secret weapon was his mechanic, a man who built his engines from junkyard parts and made them faster than the factory cars. Leo took a hesitant step forward. The story goes that in '63, at a race in Jacksonville, Scott won. He flat out beat everyone. But the officials, they wouldn't wave the checkered flag. They gave the win to the second-place driver, supposedly afraid of how the crowd would react to a black man in the winner's circle. Scott didn't get his rightful trophy for 2 whole years. But his crew, they knew who really won. The driver and the man who made his car fly. The Wraith. The name echoed in the profound silence. Kai and Marco stared at Silas, their earlier mockery replaying in their minds as an act of grotesque sacrilege. Leo's voice dropped to a whisper. But then there was a crash. A bad one. Talladega, '73. Scott's car was destroyed, and he eventually retired. But the Wraith, he just vanished, walked away from it all. Leo looked at the faded tattoos, then at the face that had seen too many years. Your name, it's Silas, isn't it? Silas Williams. The old man, Silas, stood perfectly still. Finally, he turned. On his face was a look of profound, ancient sadness. He gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. That one nod was crushing. It was a confirmation that shattered their entire world. They hadn't just mocked a homeless man. They had belittled and thrown a crumpled bill at a pioneer, a titan, a man who battled injustice with a wrench and a timing light. They had stood on the shoulders of a giant and tried to brush him off like he was dust. Humiliation is a fire that burns away pride, and in the ashes, if you're lucky, you find humility. Kai felt that fire scorching him from the inside out. He walked forward, his swagger gone, and bent down to pick up the crumpled $5 bill. He smoothed it out, then pulled out his wallet, emptied it of all the cash he had, several $1,000s, and held it all out to Silas. Sir, Kai's voice was thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. For what I said, for how we treated you. Please, this is yours. And the meal, we'll take you to the best restaurant in L.A. Anything. Please. Silas looked at the thick wad of cash. He looked at Kai's desperate, pleading eyes. He saw the shame, the genuine remorse. He then gently pushed Kai's hand away. His fingers brushed against the $100 bills, but instead, he plucked the single, smoothed-out $5 bill from Kai's other palm. A deal is a deal, Silas said softly. I said I'd fix it for food. He folded the bill once and tucked it into his pocket. He turned, picked up his tool roll, and began to walk away, his rickety cart rattling behind him into the twilight. Wait! Kai cried out. Where are you going? You can't just leave. You're a legend. You're Silas the Wraith Williams. You could work with us. We have a state-of-the-art garage. We could build anything. Silas stopped at the edge of the darkness but didn't turn around. I'm done with that life. His voice carried back on the cool night air. The noise, the money, the disrespect. He paused. But that engine, he added, a hint of the old mechanic's passion returning. That was a fine machine. It deserved to sing its proper song, and with that, he melted into the shadows of the canyon, leaving 4 young people standing in the glow of a perfectly running engine, their lives forever changed by a history lesson they never asked for. From a teacher they had completely failed to see. In a world obsessed with what's new and shiny, this is a hell of a reminder. True genius can be found anywhere. Greatness isn't measured by the shine on your car, but by the quiet dignity of your craft. Never judge a book by its cover, because you might be scorning the very author of the story. If this story inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories that uncover the hidden heroes among us. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.